Grab your sword, prepare your spells. It's time to become a legend of Omeria.
What's going on, guys? I am using OBS today, so hopefully we'll get a little bit better image quality, and I'll have a little bit more control over what I'm showing. Got even myself here in the picture, so hello. There's a little bit of delay between OBS and Facebook Live, so if you ask a question, I might be slow to respond. It looks like it's like a 5-second delay or so. But anyways, today I'm going to be going back to the dungeon that I've been working on for the last couple days. It doesn't really have a name. I've kind of been toying with the name Xandrakar. I think that sounds kind of cool. Yesterday, we found out that this place is going to be kind of like a vampire dungeon. It used to be owned by monks. Monks are all gone. And now it's run by some big vampires. So this is all the roles that we came up with yesterday, and I'm going to go start using all of that. I went ahead, yesterday if you watched, I went ahead and put in dynamic lighting on the ground floor here. So we'll see, did some pretty cool tricks with that, making it look pretty. So you'll see that's all done. And last night, after my Mad Mage game, I went ahead and did the second level too. So still some pretty cool stuff. I added in my curtains, which is always a neat trick. There's a lot more portcullises. Portculli. One thing that I really thought was cool that I want to show you guys that I did was, here's Derek the Drow again. He's my my light tester. I set up there's this huge, cool, like open hall on the second floor, or first floor if you're European. And if you open the door to the outside here, it creates this like bright light effect that I think is really nifty. Which kind of lights up the hall, like makes it really kind of spooky. I just love that. I think it's so neat. Today I'm probably going to work some more on the levels, get them all laid out with dynamic lighting, take some questions from all of you while I'm working, and hopefully by the end of it I can start importing or start developing our monsters. So if you didn't tune in yesterday, the short and long of this adventure module is that it is an old monk monastery that's been abandoned. The monks were killed by raiders, and now a vampire is using it for his or her headquarters. So let's go to this. There's 5 levels. There's going to be 5 levels in all. So you've got ground level, level 1, level 2, and then you've got a sub-level, which is going to connect to another sub-level. So I'm going to go ahead and put in that sub-level now, so we can get the whole image. In your Roll20, click Create New Page. I go put it in the right order. We'll call this sub-level 2. Really, we should call this sub-level 1, because this is going to be, it's like order-wise, it's going to be probably there first. These maps are made by Tim Harton of paratime.ca. So we're going to make it 2660 by 3290, which is Tim's kind of go-to size. Going to set our grid color to black so it shows up on that brown. Cell width is going to be half of what it normally is, because Tim does 10-foot squares. And then Roll20 usually works best with 5-foot squares. I'm going to turn on dynamic lighting with enforce line of sight and then restrict movement. Okay, so we got this set up. Next, we're going to go put in our art. So I'm going to go to my little window tile here. I'm going to upload. Let's see, which one is it? So you can see I've already got all these prepared. which I spent a couple days doing. Here we go. So this is the going to be the first sub-level. Waiting for this to load up, so it should pop up right here under recent uploads once it's done loading. Yeah, I really like I like big chunky dungeons with lots of different rooms and lots of exploration. I think in 5th edition, exploration gets left by the wayside a lot in place of combat primarily, which is why battle maps are so popular these days. Not that there's anything wrong with like a big fun battle, but at the same time, like what attracted me to D&D back in the early 90s when I got started was the maps and the ability to like see what's in different rooms. And then ultimately I really enjoyed the creation aspect of it. I've never really been a player. I've probably played 5 or 6 times in the last 28 years, and yeah, it just didn't suit me. I like telling stories and like watching everything, and I like just sitting back and watching it. It's like my own TV show where I get to decide the plot twist. It's pretty cool, but the characters still get to decide everything else. All right, so I went to advanced. Let me do that again just so you can see it. Once I've got my image in there, I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to set the dimensions, and it's going to match exactly what I've set the map to. So if we do it right, it'll click right into place, which, boop, there we go. And that is the second sub-level. We're going to leave this alone right now. We're going to go back upstairs, but now we've got the ground floor, level 1, level 2, sub-level 1, sub-level 3. So let's go back up to level 2. I'm going to look at some questions. Oh, hello again. Thanks for watching, Patrick. Awesome. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate all of you watching. Please feel free to answer any questions. Patrick's asking if you could transfer PDFs to Fantasy Grounds. Yeah, I mean, yeah, no problem at all. I have no issue with people taking my stuff and doing whatever, so long as they're not making money doing it. And you know, they're not like pirating stuff. I mean, that's just obnoxious. Because most of the stuff I give away is free anyways, and then like upgrades are like $1 or $3, so it's like, why would you? But anyways, yeah, keep on doing it. How do you keep your players interested in dungeon crawls? That's a good question. So I run a campaign I call Never Ending Mad Mage. And this question's from Jessica. How do I keep players interested in dungeon crawls? I run a game called Never Ending Mad Mage, which takes place in the Wizards of the Coast module dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is 23 levels of 80-something rooms. And the way to do it, I've found, there's a couple things I've done that have helped take off the edge a little bit on it. Because, yeah, I mean, being around in the Underdark all day long is probably going to drive you insane. So what we've done is we started off, it was just like anything else. You go down the yawning portal, and it and I can you know what, I won't show you because some of my players are watching and I don't want there to be spoilers. But you go down into the yawning portal, and there's the normal things, and we did this for about 2 weeks, and I run this game every night on my Patreon for platinum and legendary members. And it was a mixture of different players every night. So it's kind of like a West Marches campaign. And if you're not familiar with West Marches, like, it's a style of campaign where you always have different players, and they always kind of wander around the same maps, and what they do kind of affects the other players, but they're not different. They're not really like in the same game. Well, it's the same kind of thing. Like, they're a guild, and they would go down with different party members each night based on people's schedules. Like, I can run this all the time because, yeah, I mean, I'm DMDave, and this is what I do for a living. But, you know, like, everybody else has jobs and quarantine and families and stuff. So we'd have different people every night, and it was just something fun to do. In time, it started evolving more, and like the communication between them was really cool because like you would have people go down one night and do something different. Now, if you had the same group of people every night, you might want to do the same thing too, but try to spice it up a little bit. I find that the best run games that I do typically have this sort of progression, and this is it's always going to be based on what your players and characters want to see too. You don't want to just like shove your game down their throat. You want to like see what they're into and go with it. So if you've got like a combat loving party, throw a bunch of combat. If you got a group that likes role playing, throw this. But I think a good balanced game usually starts with some sort of role playing hook. Um, so take like the game the other night I was playing. They had these plans to go out and do all this stuff, and they walk outside, and right away there's a forest fire going on in this place that they're at in the dungeon. It's Dungeon of the Mad Mage is weird. There's like a giant forest. Yeah, I do love the TPK, Benny. The There's a forest fire which creates a role playing dynamic and it presents a challenge. Then they did some exploration where they wandered around, and then it ends with combat. And I usually like to try to go in that sort of path. So you set up the hooks early on in the story. The bridge of the story is the exploration, so like the center of the story, and then I finish with combat, which is kind of the high point for the story. I feel if you do all three, like one of any of those three things, like too much, like if it's all role playing sessions aren't terrible, but I mean, people still like combat. If you do it all exploration, it might get tiresome, and then if you do it all combat, it might get tiresome. So I like to have a good balance, and I like to do it kind of in that order: role play, exploration, and then combat. I mean, that's not every model, but generally that's how my quote unquote episodes go. So that's what I do, and then just keeping like a good story and like returning to points and remembering that ultimately a dungeon and anything else is going to be an organic experience. Like there's more than just yeah, NPCs are important. Yeah, puzzles, riddles. Yeah, it's the best thing to do is just change it up all the time. Because if you make a dungeon that's nothing but combat or nothing but traps, and there's definitely exceptions. Like take like Tomb of Horrors. Tomb of Horrors has almost like no combat. Like I think you fight like a 4-armed gargoyle or 3-armed gargoyle and then the demi-lich, but it's mostly just death traps. And like that's kind of its theme, and that's what you go for. Which it's think of like a TV show, right? Like Supernatural or any kind of show that's got like a lot of episodes. Say like the Buffy format, right? You have your normal kind of monster of the week or like your normal sessions that like each one is kind of familiar to the players. Like they kind of know the drill, they know how it's going to go, and then you change it up periodically with different styles. And so like take like Supernatural's first season, or like an episode of Doctor Who. It's Monster of the Week style. You have the basic introduction of the theme. You have everything that bridges to that, and you have a climax. And if you build your sessions kind of using that same thought, that's a great way to go. And then like every 1 out of 5, break it up so it's completely different. So if like every adventure you run has the 3 pillars of 5th edition, with like role playing, exploration, combat, then when you change it up, it'll kind of do different things. Sorry if I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, I mean that's just the thing. Just being cognizant of like keeping it fresh and trying to change it up, but not trying to go too crazy. Just trying to work in a little bit of stuff each time, and that's what we've done with Mad Mage. I mean, normally like you'd see something like Mad Mage and be like, oh my god, this is so many dungeons. This is 800 rooms. How on earth am I going to get through all this? You just gotta like keep it fresh and keep it new. And I think Mad Mage does a really good job of that. Some dungeons, yeah, like Tomb of Horrors, it's just going to be it's a beat down. I don't think I would ever play Tomb of Horrors with people who really cared a lot about their characters because they're probably going to get killed. I think the Tomb of Horrors conceit was that it was going to kill the hell out of you because it was just made for conventions. So you came in there with like a stack of character sheets and like hoped you got through as best you could. Well, I mean, we don't know. We'll see. Patrick says I'm probably not going to get through all 800 rooms. You never know, man. Like, we play every night, so it won't be the same people every night. I have no idea how anybody can run Dungeon of the Mad Mage in like weekly sessions or anything like that. I mean, we're running daily, and we barely scrape the icing off. Anyways, let me fiddle around with this a little bit. So yesterday, if you'd seen me talking, I was talking about this is going to be like a big vampire lair. Now, I don't know much more than kind of the basic themes and what the maps look like, but for now, I'm laying in the dynamic lighting. And once I get all the dynamic lighting done, I'm going to start plotting out the rooms. I did a little bit of plotting yesterday, so I thought this room right here was really cool because it's got like this big area. There's 5 secret little nodes here. I thought that would be really cool. Some kind of like where the vampire spawn lay maybe. And then the vampire himself might be in this secret room or somewhere else. Some folks suggested that maybe I do it in the lower levels. But I think a vampire, they're super intelligent beings, and they have 17 intelligence, which if you're not familiar with how the statistics work in the game, like your average person is 10.5, and it's on a bell curve because it's 3d6. So that means the majority of people are going to be at 10, and then it's going to be spread out. So only with 3d6, only oh gosh, what's the math? It'd be 1 out of 216 people in the world will ever be an 18, right? Like, so you got to think that that's less than 1% of the population's ever going to be that intelligent. It's like super level intelligence, if not beyond that. So even like the smartest person that you might know in real life is probably at most a 15 or a 16. And anything beyond that is like superhuman intelligence. Like there's no 20s in the real world, for example. And I would go as far to argue that there's probably no like real 17s or 18s. Like humans, if you base it on like what dexterity can do, none of the animals in the beast appendix go beyond, I think, 15 or 16 on their dexterity stats. And it's a pretty broad range. So this tells me that anything above 16 is beyond what's like possible from organic creatures. So even like a doppelganger who has, I think, a dexterity of 18 is like faster than anything that lives on Earth, like in terms of reflexes. So that's kind of a way to think of it, that 18 is like a heroic score that only exists in fantasy worlds. But realistically, most human beings are going to be kind of in that range of 8 to 12, I would say, for the most part. Your geniuses are like 13 to 14s, and like your Einsteins are like 15 to 16, and anything above that is crazy. So, TLDR, vampires are 17. They are going to have thought every single thing in the world out. They're going to set up their lair to be 100% built to them. The only thing that would imbalance that is ego and cockiness, which will probably be their downfall. So before we start really building out these layers and deciding what goes and what's, I'll probably create our villain first, because if I'm dealing with like an orc war chief, like an orc war chief is going to, well, it really depends on any villain, but let's say like an owlbear. An owlbear is going to find a place that's close to food and a place where it can protect its young and call it a day. But the smarter a creature gets, the more likely it's going to set itself up in a place that gives it the most advantages. And then the tricky part is, because I'm not an intelligence 17 monster, but I've got I've got full command of this world. I have to try to think for them. So anyways, that's what we're going to be thinking of here. So while I'm babbling, I'm going to start setting up some more dynamic lighting on this. If you didn't see yesterday, With dynamic lighting, I like to put in the walls first. So you go to your dynamic lighting tool, you grab your draw shape tool, and this is the easiest way in my mind. If you've got like a dungeon like this that's got a lot of right angles and straight lines, the easiest way to get everything laid out here is to just take it and line it up and get it as close as you can with a little bit of edge leading over so you can get it. And what this does is it creates a straight line here, creates a straight line here, and it creates a straight line here. And then you just start overlapping all of these in order to do. And I'm going to leave all of the round edges out because we're going to be doing that by hand with the polygon tool. And that's it. We're just going to keep doing that until it's done. While I'm putzing on this, let me see. Let me see if anybody else has any questions. Yeah, Mad Mage. I can't imagine anybody ever getting through Mad Mage. So I've been running Mad Mage every night for, I want to say, we've been going on. Sarge will probably tell you better. But it's been at least a month, I think. I started it on a whim. I really had an itch to run D&D for my patrons, and it was like a Monday, and I was just like, man, I want to run a game. And I was originally going to run, believe it or not, this dungeon that I'm building here, but I couldn't get it to, like, I didn't know it at the time, but Tim's maps didn't conform perfectly to Roll20, so I didn't have the time to go through and reset them. Oh, one thing you can do, like if it doesn't match up perfectly, I just use the resizing tool, because ultimately it doesn't matter if what's in there. And my browser's running really slow, likely because I'm running OBS Facebook stream at the same time as this. Thankfully, I've got a relatively new Mac, but it's like, Dave, why are you doing this to me? Dave, I can't do that right now, Dave. You are running too much on your processor. So I started doing Mad Mage, and I just grabbed like the patrons I talk to most. So if you're a patron of mine, I've got a room called the Legendary Lounge. If you're platinum, it's automatic. And then if you are not platinum, if you've been a patron for a while, and I haven't like created official rules yet, but if you've been a patron for a while and you're really helpful with like typo correction or just like a positive voice in the community and like you help people out. Oh, and people who run games on my Discord server too also get an auto in. You get to come into a Legendary Lounge, which is just basically, I mean, I've got 3,000 patrons, so I wish I could just be there all the time, but I can't, between writing and running the staff. Kind of have to hide. But that was the room where I would like chat with people and like just hang out. And so one night I just said, hey, you, and you, let's go into a dungeon. I bought Dungeon of the Mad Mage off of Roll20. One of the more expensive modules to buy on Roll20, but when you see like everything that's gone into it, you kind of get it. I mean, you're talking like, gee whiz, 25 maps, all with the dynamic lighting, all with the tokens where they're supposed to be. Very few mistakes. Like I've played Yawning Portal, and I can tell you that thing is just got a ton of mistakes. No offense to whoever made it, but that thing's buggy. But Mad Mage has been pretty perfect. There's a few things I've had to fix. I mean, it's not totally imperfect, but then again, if you've worked in content, like mistakes happen, so I can't hate on that. I can get the monster manual and point out like 5 typos that I've found. So we got these people. We went in and I just dumped them in there. I'd only kind of like, I didn't really prep a lot. So this is kind of interesting. I don't do a lot of prep for D&D. I know the rules, backwards and forwards, but even then I'm not perfect. I've had people correct me on rules things. I mean, but you got to keep in mind that knowing all the rules in D&D is very difficult because you've got 3 textbook, A5 sized books that you have to kind of know, or at least know where the stuff is in order to reference it. And they're all 350 pages long. Yeah, there's art filler, but I would say it's an average of 500 words per page. So you're dealing with 450,000 words of content just to play the game, which is, it's a lot. But I've had a lot of practice, and learning the rules in the game. But I don't really do a lot of prep because, one, my way of thinking is if you do a ton of prep, you are going to end up being more railroady in the long run. Because if you've planned out what you want to happen in advance and they don't do it, you're going to start getting this feeling called sunk cost bias, which is a behavioral economics term for basically like, and a lot of people do it too. Like they've put the time into something or they spent money on something, and they don't want to feel like they've lost that time. So it's like if somebody, what's a good example? I can't think of anything right now, but like somebody who writes something but doesn't want to edit it or doesn't want to delete like a paragraph because, well, I took the time to write it, I don't want to delete it. Well, just because you wrote it doesn't mean it's good, you know. And it's the same kind of thing with like with planning. Like if you're putting a lot of time and energy into thinking of plots, and you're doing a lot of like if-then style thinking, like, well, if they do this, then this will happen. If they do this, this will happen. Well, the thing is, like, D&D is not a if-then game. D&D is or it shouldn't be an if-then game. It's very much a game of storytelling, and frankly, anything can happen. And if you try to plan out everything that happens, you're not playing D&D. You're writing a choose-your-own-adventure. So if you've got now, having said that, a lot of players like kind of know the drill. Like they know when they're getting quest hooked. They know when they should go here, or like when the GM is kind of nudging them, and they just roll with it. I mean, that's what, like, I would say more experienced players probably do. It's weird. It's like if I were to graph it on a curve, I would say like inexperienced players are just going to go with the flow. Like someone who's brand new, they're probably just going to do kind of whatever. But it's the people who've played like maybe 5 or 6 sessions, kind of get what's going on. They're probably gonna be the ones more likely to break it. And then after people have been playing for multiple years, like my buddy John, for example, he's been playing for like I think 40 years. He knows better. He knows to go with the flow. So if you were to curve it, like the likeliness to break the game is probably more for those people who have a little bit more experience, but like haven't been doing it forever. I'm a terrible player. Like I like to, I know the rules very well, so I like to go off the grid. But yeah, don't ever DM for me. You'll want to die. As a DM, you'll never want to do it again. um, so, anyways, yeah, I don't do a lot of prep. Like even when it comes to the books, like I kind of get a gist of what's going on, but I don't want to turn it into a railroad. In other words, kind of like force people to go where they want to do. Now, granted, when you're dealing with a big dungeon, um, it's essentially has walls, so it prevents people from going certain places um, that they're not supposed to or that they can't get to. So you've got a little bit more control, but at the same time, the Dungeon of the Mad Mage has 23 layers littered with arches. Now, the rules say that there's supposed to be like this lady who pops out the wall and goes, "Oh no, don't go down there, you'll get killed." Like if people try to go into levels that are too hard for them. But I thought, one, that's stupid. Like this isn't a video game. That's some video game shit. And then two, I really wanted, like, I feel confident enough that if people go beyond something that's their level, like I can telegraph it enough in advance that there's danger to be had. And the only times people have been killed so far in my campaign is when they do things that are just like rash. Like they didn't really sit and think about. Like the last time we had a near TPK a few days ago because they just weren't doing perception checks and they weren't checking doors. in a level that's pretty dangerous. They had been kind of spoiled with a few easy encounters to start, so they were walking around like Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, like, we bad, we bad. Well, yeah, and then they opened the door and there's two gray slod there, and they got absolutely trashed, and ended up losing a character who got trash compacted, which has to be one of my most favorite ways ever to kill a player. So, anyways, yeah, with the prep, I don't do a lot. Like, I get a rough idea of where they might go and kind of look forward to like 5 or 6 places in advance, and from there, and I try to run the book as much as possible. The information architecture of Mad Mage is really good in that you can quickly read the material and get a feeling for where they're supposed to be going. And sorry, I'm checking out something real quick. So there's supposed to be some like secret doors in here, and I want to make sure that I'm not blocking off the secret doors before putting them in. Where was I? What was I babbling about this time? Keep the smallest of names, personalities, and hooks on like a 1 to 10 list. This is from Patrick. On a 1d10 random results. So yeah, like I do that, but at the same time, yeah, that's really similar to what I do, Patrick. Really, I just use random tables from around the web and on DM Guild. I don't even go as far to like create a list in advance. So say if like today, like I'm going to be introducing a new NPC, and I'm not going to say who it is, but like, or let me use a bit different situation. Say you have characters in a crowded village, and they don't like. I haven't named everybody in the village. Like I've got like 5. Yeah. Don John is definitely one thing that I would use. So Patrick asked me if I was aware of Don John. Yeah, absolutely. I use Don John, FantasyNameGenerators.com, and then the DMG. DMG really has a lot of the tables that you need, and Xanathar's also has a bunch of random names. But I would say at any given time while I'm playing, I've probably got Don John pulled up. Mostly for spells and monsters because I can sort them easier. And the spells are super useful when I'm writing content, especially I'm planning out wizard spells. So I can like sort them by like transmuter, wizard, stuff like that, and see them by levels. So Donjon, God, I've typed it some donjon.bin.sh is a super useful website if you don't have it on your radar. Next, I also make sure that I've got some maps that I can use pretty quick. So usually blog.dysonlogos.com has a bunch of good maps. Donjon can make some random maps, though I would say Donjon random maps are probably better for like their caverns versus the other ones because they're a little bit too random for the buildings. Still a good generator. Also really cool for world generator if you ever want to make a like I don't like to think a lot when I'm making maps. I like to pick a map and roll with it. Or like I license maps from Tim Harton or any other people that I'm work with. And then FantasyNameGenerators.com is super useful. Like the names are really good, and they got like a generator for everything. Like I will just type random stuff into Google. Like what was the last thing I did? Hobgoblin random generator name, and it pops up. And then I think before that, something even more. Oh, Spiderfolk. You can't say Ettercap because that's wizards, but I said Spiderfolk name generator, and like I came up with the Spiderfolk name. Like I try not to think about it too much. Like you can really get analysis paralysis if you're sitting around trying to think of like every single detail of things. And if you need more details, just go to the DMG chapter 4. Has all your NPC stuff. You can roll random traits for them. You can roll their flaws and characteristics, and you just roll with it. Like if you're like, oh, what are they going to sound like? I don't know. Pick an actor to play them. Like just pick an actor that you can do an impression of, or come up with an accent. Pick out like 5 character flaws and just play it. It doesn't matter if they're cookie cutouts. And that's really the way you should do like a lot of different stuff in the game. Like if you sit there, especially for those of you who want to like create your own worlds and like homebrew, like if you're sitting and thinking like every single detail, you're going to go absolutely insane. And if that's, I mean, if that's what you enjoy doing and that's fun, go for it. But if you're doing it for the sake of your players, you're just going to burn yourself out. So I've always been an advocate for building worlds like piece by piece, like start small and build out. Instead of like, I don't need to know the politics of like this place over here. I just need to know, like, if I create this puzzle piece here and this puzzle piece here, how are they all going to fit together? And then like take Amiria for example. Like I know what most of the content of Amiria is, but like there's entire sections that I haven't done anything with yet. Just I picked a random name and just ran it. But anyways, that's yeah, like when it comes to planning, I don't do a ton. Even if I'm like running a module, I just kind of read through it to get the gist. And then like what I'll do is when I'm running a game, and eventually I'll probably stream some of these games. I'll watch what the players are doing carefully, and like if they're headed somewhere, I'll be reading ahead. So I stay quiet most of the time until someone asks me a question or I have to tell them to stop. So I'll like literally I'll be like stop, and everybody will like halt, and then I'll like read an important section of text that they need to know. But yeah, that's more or less my my style of doing things. Because I mean, again, like I don't have time. Frankly, I don't have time to sit and plan a lot of stuff, and it's more fun when you're just doing random stuff. And if you have a good sense of, I would say like I talked a little bit about reading yesterday. I don't read a lot of fiction. I read mostly nonfiction, and I've read a lot of before I got into doing business stuff. Like I took a year and I was reading like 200 books a year of just like nonfiction stuff and like psychology and history and things like that. And when you have a really good understanding of like psychology and history and why people do the things that they do, it gets easier to kind of like understand the world that you're creating and why certain things fit in. And really just helps you with design. So like yeah, it's fun to read fiction, but at the same time, all you're doing is looking at the basically the writers are doing the same thing of the books that you enjoy. They're reading history and stuff and stealing. I mean, you read George R. R. Martin. I mean, dude is just like stealing egregiously from history and just like like adding dragons. But there's like his books definitely have like kind of a War of the Roses kind of vibe to it, and putting some underlying themes and things like that. And that's really, I think, where story creation it's good. One thing I forgot to do before setting this thing up, and it's probably going to bite me in the butt now, before doing the lighting, is I forgot to put in my secret doors. So I'm going to go back to my Photoshop doc, and I don't think I'm capturing my Photoshop today, so you may not see what I'm looking at. But I'm going to go back in there and see where my secret doors are supposed to be and start adding those in. So I think I've got one right here. When I'm doing secret doors on here, I don't get crazy. I don't make like a big chunky like S or like a token for it. I just use the the text tool itself. Oh, let me make sure I put that on the right layer, because this is just for me. I mean, like my professional modules, I do it a little bit different, but I mean, as long as it's clean and looks good, ultimately what your players are going to see matters more than what you're going to see. And as long as you can read it, like, it's fine. And that's why the cool thing about Roll20 is I can like write notes all over it. I can do whatever I want. I mean, yeah, the more stuff you put on there, it might slow things down a little bit, but ultimately, like there's no reason not to like write notes on your maps and your modules and like build them out that way. So put another one here, and then we'll go back and edit the light for that. If you ever you'll notice it snaps to the grid. If you hold down your it's Option key on the Mac, or I think Alt on PC. it lets you move it to kind of wherever you want it to be. So I'm actually going to let it snap here for the angle and then move it around using my option. So yeah, I like lots of secret doors. I mean, not like crazy ton, but you know, they're a lot of fun. And there's always going to be two kinds of secret doors. There's going to be ones like you have to be cognizant of what you're putting on the other side of that door. If it's something that must be found in order to keep the story going, then you need to give hints that it exists. But if it's an extra reward, like a really snazzy magic item or like a plot hook to something else, like something that the adventure doesn't need but it's nice to have, then you can make it a little bit more secret. And honestly, I like setting universal DCs for pretty much everything in a dungeon. Like I like I'll talk a little bit about DCs here in a second after I get these secret doors out. I think, and this is kind of my way of thinking, but I think you shouldn't have to think too much about a DC. It should be relative to their level, and it shouldn't always be really hard. Like I use 15 a lot just as like my standard number, especially with like higher tier players. Pretty much when they get to the point where you've got people who've got like a +3 proficiency bonus and +2 to +3 in the skill. 15 is like basically you're creating like a 50% or 40 to 50% chance of them succeeding. And that's kind of what you have to be aware of. When you set it for 10, like that's like a nice easy victory too. And that should be easy stuff to find. 15 is like a little bit more difficult. And 20 is like a lot harder to find, but should always be rewarded accordingly. There's a lot of DC 20s in some of the modules that I read from Wizards of the Coast. Let me check for some more questions. Love this statement. What your party sees and what you see. Couldn't you use advantage in the rules to find the ones that are needed? What do you mean, Craig? And I see your name. I'm like, Craig Robinson. I loved you in the office. I realize you're probably a different Craig Robinson and spelled different. But yeah, there's some guidelines. I think third edition was like had way more like stringent guidelines on how to do DCs, like down to the point. And then also like remember if you ever played third edition was just like have like some absurd. They'd have like DCs of like 40, which were like a DC 40 strength check. It was like you could push the world out of orbit or it's like Chuck Norris type shit. Like fortunately, 5th edition really only goes up to like DC 30, which is basically the game's way of saying it's practically impossible. The doors. Yeah, it just depends. Like I think the best thing to do. So like here's how I do wisdom and investigation. All right, so wisdom perception checks I usually use for like somebody enters a room and they want to do a perception check, which is a perception check in my mind is like a glance around using your senses to get a feeling. And typically it's going to be the ones that are not touch or taste, ones that exist outside of your bubbles. So hearing, smell, and sight. And whatever, temperature or whatever else, there's, when I was a kid, there were 5 senses. Now there's like 20. I don't know. Pluto is also a planet, but we'll talk about that later. So that's like, you say you enter like this room here, right? You do a perception check and you roll a 20. I would say something like, oh, you notice that there's a draft coming from right here. And then to find the actual secret door, you have to do an investigation check. So there's something weird. So a perception check will tell you there's something weird about it, and the investigation check will like actually find the door and how it operates and stuff like that. So kind of like in like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, he knew that there was some way that somebody got into his hotel room, and then there was the statue with the tatas, and like he made a perception check, or probably even like a wisdom survival, to like realize, okay, how did this guy get in here? Investigation check on the statue, succeeds, goes through, right? And that's kind of like my way of thinking with that. And investigation checks too, I think, should always be like you're investigating either what you're holding or like a very specific item of on the map. Like investigation check would be like if there was a desk in this room, perception check would be for the whole room, and you'd be like, you notice that one of the drawers in the desk is kind of crooked, and then if you go up to the desk and you do an investigation check on it, you realize that it's like a secret door. So that's kind of how I do it. When it's something you really want to hide, like say like if in this room, like let's even say up here, like this is just a nice passage that connects A and B, or this room and this room. I may not ever telegraph this door here if it's not like 100% necessary, nor may I telegraph this door here. From either side, because what you're gonna find with a lot of characters when they end up in a small hallway like this is they're just gonna know right away that if they go through here and they see these weird like alcoves, they're gonna be like, oh, there's gotta be a secret door here. So you don't really have to give anything away then. And I love that it ends at a dead end here, because like you're gonna have people like, I know there must be a secret door here, and they're just gonna be like searching for an hour. Another thing you might do, and this kind of goes back to third edition, and I do this a lot, is be cognizant of like the time it takes to do things. Like I would say a perception check is always going to take like your typical round 6-second action, but an investigation check, like an investigation check in, say if you want to investigate like everything in the room. Like, Dave, I want to investigate this whole study and like search all this stuff. Then instead of just making one roll and then like doing it, say, okay, you have to spend 10 minutes here checking out this room, at the end of which, hold on, I gotta throw my dog outside. At the end of which they have to make an investigation check, and that would count for like all the searches they did in that room. And you might make the DC a little bit lower for something like that, because like if you fail, that's the other thing too. Like I typically don't allow re-rolls within the same 24 hours or under the same condition, as I think it's dumb for like someone to come in and be like, oh, I want to make a perception check. Oh, well, you don't see anything. Well, I want to do it again. Like, well, no. Like you need to give like some sort of reason that they have a low number. So one thing I like to do is like to consider like the character's like current frame of mind. So a few nights ago, the characters in my Mad Mage game were searching through some buildings, and one of the characters, Sarge's character, actually just kept getting bad rolls. And my thought was like, instead of saying like, oh, you just don't find anything, which is boring and stupid, because if they get like a 3, they know they're probably missing something, or that they fail to roll. But if you phrase it in such a way like, oh, well, the recent events have made everything kind of funky, like you're kind of stressed out from like what's just happened to you, that means like they can't try to do it again. Like they can't say like, oh, well, I'm going to try to make another perception check. Like it's like, no, man, you need to take a few hours to clear your head before you can really get a handle on this. And doing it that way, like they know they failed, but now they have a reason that they failed. And it can be any kind of thing you could think. You could say like, there's too much commotion going on. The smell of a ghast is like jammed up your nose. Anything like that's a better reason to explain a failure, other than just like, oh, well, it didn't work. Because they're going to know, it didn't work. And like the reason it didn't work was because they had a low dice roll. But when it's like something outside of that, it's a little bit more like, I think, flavorful and interesting to describe that way. I mean, maybe that's just me. That's kind of like how I like to do things, because it just makes for a better story. And yeah, like I always try to like have uniform explanations too on why certain things don't work. Like I will pretty much, even on failed rolls or even on successful rolls, success or fail, like I'll say it seems like there's nothing here. Like success or fail, like that's like especially if they're searching for something or it seems like they're telling the truth. If you phrase it uniformly every time, they won't be able to see. But if you have a tell, it's just think of it like playing poker. If you have a tell, this is especially good when like insight checks when they you have an NPC that's telling the truth, but the characters. I mean, I'm sure you've run into this like a million times where like the players are just like, I know they're lying. Like this happened with an NPC the other night, and they're like, oh, I know he's lying. He's got to be lying. There's no way and like person was telling the truth. They just were a Dumbo. and like they weren't convinced, so I just let it go. Like I don't say anything. Like, hey, they want to think outside of that. It is what it is, but they're going to keep getting the same result that they're lying. And it's so funny how like players sometimes will confabulate, like when they want a PC or an NPC to be lying, they'll be like, oh, he must be using some sort of powerful magic. It's like, nah, man, Occam's razor. He's probably just an idiot. And then, like, what's funny is, like, even after, like, they heard from a second source, and I'm just going to tell you guys now, if you guys are in my Mad Mage game, like, y'all are cracking me up with that mage dude, because the whole time he's just a fake, and y'all are like, no, he's a powerful archmage, because I used an archmage token, just to mess with them. Sorry, let me back up and tell the whole story. And they're gonna like if my players are listening, they're gonna love this. I wonder if Sarge is listening right now. But so they run into this archmage who's being protected, or by an archmage token, not even an archmage, because in my mind the whole time I was like, oh, this guy's not really an archmage. But I use the archmage token, the same one that's in like the appendix of the book. Like the painted head looks like a red wizard of Thay type deal. And I wouldn't even think about it at the time. Like I'm like, I don't care. It's just a token. This isn't what he looks like. And I didn't even describe him as looking like that. I described him as looking kind of like a young, quiet guy. Looks like he's got, like anxiety. Like he looks like the kind of guy you'd see playing Magic the Gathering at a GameStop who doesn't really talk much other than when like telling you what he's doing in the game. And he's got this goblin who's like really or hobgoblin who's really speaking his praises. And then some events happen that involve magic. So they're like, oh, this archmage, he's the one who did it. Look at Sarge is like, I am listening and I am mad. And like the next day, like the guy stays at their house and the wizard played by Sarge wants to copy dude's spellbook. And the guy comes out, he's like, the hobgoblin bodyguard's like, yes, he will allow you to copy his spellbook. That's the voice I use for Verkrog, the hobgoblin bodyguard. Yes, he will allow you to do this. And like they go to this table and like everybody's crowded around like, wow, this is so great. We're in the company of an archmage. And the kid opens up his book. It's like a brand new spell book. Like it might as well even still be like laminated from the store. And I'm like dropping all these hints. And like all it's got is like the spells for an acolyte from Volo's Guide. Like it's literally like taken straight from his like shield, disguise self, and burning hands. And it's like, and then he gives kind of like a shitty, like just like a smile, like look what I can do, kind of thing. But that's not how I got interpreted. Which I'm just sitting back here like, oh my gosh, guys. They're like, he's got to be using like some sort of magic. He's bullshitting us. This guy's an archmage because he's an archmage token. And then they end up pissing off the bodyguard, who's kind of like, I rolled up his stats earlier that day and it came up as irritable. So they ended up blaming him for the forest fire that happened. It's like, I know that, or they're not blaming him. They're like trying to see through it. They're doing like that Larry David, like, you ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm and like Larry David's doing that, like, like trying to get a reading on whether or not they're lying. And he's like, okay. Well, like they did that and it ends up pissing off the hobgoblin. So they book it. But they're still like, seriously, like 2 hours of conversation on how this like kid is like screwing with them, and it's I'm just like, okay, well, I can believe whatever they want to believe. I'm not going to tell them one way or the other. Now they know. Now they can be mad at me. Let's see, is Sarge mad? Damn sketchy mages. Sarge says he just wanted sending. No, the drunk mage is actually has skills. He's just drunk. They're asking in Facebook comments about a different mage. But anyways, yeah, like they later found out they did some like they're like, all right, we're gonna go ask around and see what this guy's story is, and then they find out from successful persuasion checks like it's exactly what it was. The guy's full of crap. I mean, he is legitimately going in the dungeon to look for the mage guild, but yeah, like I mean, he's just an acolyte. He's like a first level wizard, and in a really dangerous environment. And he's got a hobgoblin who, as far as the hobgoblin's concerned, like he's the greatest mage alive. So it's just a really interesting seeing like what players will do to like overthink situations when really at the end of the day it's just like the simplest answer. And granted, sometimes there's going to be some more complicated things, but like sometimes stuff like that, like me as a DM, I just love sitting back and like watching it happen because it's like, well, this is fun. Maybe I could play with this. Like when you're like, if I were to have spoken up about it and been like, oh no guys, he's telling the truth, it's legit. Like that wouldn't be as much fun other than them like getting really worked up that like this guy's messing with them and he's using illusory script on his book and he's really an archmage, all because this token was a freaking archmage. Sorry, Sarge. Sarge's gonna be mad. He's never gonna trust me again. I don't trust any of Dave's NPCs. It looks like an O2 token. Is it? I don't know. It could be Hallister. All right, let me get back to putting this stupid dungeon together so I can start stocking it and doing what I do. So yeah, putting in secret doors is always fun. You just gotta like when you build a dungeon kind of this way, it's like you can do it a couple different ways. So one way is that I build dungeons is I just go. Well, let me say it like this. You kind of have to know the theme of the dungeon itself and who is in charge and why the people that are there are doing the things that they do. So we know that there's going to be a vampire here. So we kind of have to think of it backwards. But like if this was a dungeon overrun with monsters, like just like monstrosities and beasts who didn't really, they're just going to do it based on like their ecology and what makes sense with getting their basic needs, then it's going to have a different arrangement altogether. But the fact that this is run by a vampire who's a very intelligent, creature, it's going to have a little bit more thought put into it. So with a monster, with like a creature and beast dungeon, I would probably just start from the first, like the entrance and work my way in. And maybe do a little bit of planning, like with some things, but basically create it based on the flow. But with something like this, there's going to be a little bit more thought into it, and I will probably start from the end and work my way back. Plus, like I think it's going to be a lot of fun to throw in some oh god, like puzzles and riddles and things like that. So I want to like work backwards from those two. Like some of the most complicated dungeons I've done, like Kieranborn Prince, probably the Hearth one. Like I had to start from the puzzles. Like, all right, what kind of puzzles do I want to have in this place? And then like work backwards from that. That's a really complicated way to do things. Like if you're just starting out kind of dungeon crafting, puzzles are probably the hardest thing to add in to your dungeon. But if you do them right, they can also be one of the most fun things. And the other thing with puzzles, and I know you'll see, like, you've probably seen the memes, is like what you think is a simple puzzle sometimes is not. Like you have to like consider that like sometimes it's good to do things even simpler than you think. And that's not to say your players are dumb, but kind of like the situation with this mage. A lot of times you're going to overthink it. Like we were running me and my Saturday group, who's collectively known as the Bloody Bunch. We were running Desert of Desolation, which is an old, pretty cool second edition dungeon created by the Hickmans, who are probably most famous for creating Ravenloft, as well as I think the Dragonlance books and just the whole Dragonlance world in general. Anyways, there's this riddle that had to do with like, you know, everybody on this side of town's a liar and everybody on this side of town tells the truth. What question can you ask that will let you know what side of town you're on? And I think the answer is like something like, is this the east end of town? And if you ask that, like the liars, like if they both say yes, then yes. If they both say no, then no. Because the people telling you the truth, or something like that. I don't remember. But like it was pretty simple. And Joe, who's in my group, like immediately was like, "Oh, well, it's this." And I'm just sitting there listening. But like John, who's totally brilliant. I mean, he's an attorney, smart guy. Man, he's just overthinking it. And there was like easily a 20-minute conversation about this stupid Sphinx riddle. And I'm, again, like I just sit there like, I'm not telling you guys one way or the other. You tell the Sphinx the wrong thing, it's gonna bite your head off, man. But other than that, just yeah, I'm just I'm like one of those gifs of someone just like grabbing a bucket of popcorn and just sitting there like, all right, well, let's see how long we can discuss this goofy thing. So puzzles a lot of times are going to be like that. The best thing to do is when it comes to puzzles, I mean, I'll just be straight up with you. It's just steal from like other sources. I think video games do a really good job with puzzles because they keep it pretty simple. I saw, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of, and maybe somebody in the Facebook. Trying to think of, there's this like online comedy series or like a comedy troupe that does like a lot of like parodies of like video games. And I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about. There's like one British guy, and there's one guy who pretends to be he's always the NPC, and he's always dealing with like characters doing just like the most absurd things. Oh jeez, I can't think of their name. I was watching one of their videos the other day, but they had this one that's making fun of like dungeon puzzles, and you have this like mage show up like, hey, for 200 years I've protected this area with this puzzle you'll never know. And it's like something as simple as like grabbing 4 things like within 20 feet and putting them in the right order. And it's a lot of time it's exactly like that. Like and that's you think it's so simple when you're writing it, but really, I mean, it needs to kind of go down to that level. Now, granted, you can do harder, and God knows, like some of the puzzles I have are like Kieranborn Prince, for example, which is an adventure I have on my Patreon. It's pretty popular. It's very trap heavy, death trap, Tomb of Horrors style dungeon, and it's got some pretty heinous riddles in it. But for the most part, if it's not all about the puzzles, just keeping it simple is going to be the best thing to do. So I kind of like the idea of like, say something as simple as like assembling the parts and things. So referencing that video game satire again, like maybe I'll do something with that here. Like you have to put something together, and like if you think about vampire games, I mean that's what Strahd is, right? It's like a bunch of like fetch quests, like capped off by a big BBEG fight, because you get like at the beginning of the game, and this is spoilers for anybody who hasn't read Strahd. The Vistani, who are like the gypsies of Barovia, like tell you your fortune, and that part of that fortune is like you got to go find this dude or this lady, this guy, gal, or binary pal, team up with them. You got to find the Sun Sword, which is going to be in a random place, and then you have to find Strahd, who's going to be chilling in a random location. And then, like, to beat the game, you've got to use all those components. So I think doing something like that's kind of cool, and it's like a nice little throwback to, like the awesomeness that is Ravenloft. Like, man, when I think of Ravenloft, I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous. I mean, I've got some cool adventures like Tether. I think is my own kind of like little Ravenloft. I don't know if you've ever played Tether. It's a mystery adventure set in a kind of a haunted manor with ghosts and ghouls and all kinds of cool stuff. And there's a lot of like little puzzles in there as well, and as well some fights. Like there's like 6 different endings or so, or 6 different paths you could take to win Tether. But I might do something like that, or maybe a simpler version of it where there's like puzzles, but also fights. 3 pillars, right? Exploration, role playing, and combat. So, and then I guess the 4th pillar being puzzles. Let's see what. Viva La Gaming. That's the one I'm thinking of. Ben said it there. Yeah, Viva La Gaming's pretty cool. Those guys are funny. Like, I don't really play video games, but like I get the jokes. Like I played. I'll say this. Like when I was in my my late teens, I did play a lot of Ultima Online. So a lot of those like cliches were in Ultima Online, and they probably a lot of them come from like MMORPGs like World of Warcraft and if anybody remembers EverQuest and Ultima Online and stuff like that, like the ones who kind of like laid the groundwork for your biggest MMOs. Let's see. Patrick says, I had a dwarf climb an injured dragon as it was taking off to escape, proceed to cut off one of its wings and ride the dragon like a surfboard into his own party. Made some rolls, party made dex saves, so the dwarf managed to almost TPK the whole party with one winged. Yeah, that's pretty much D&D in a nutshell. The crazy things that are always going to be the things that you remember. So it's always best to like let the players kind of dictate the shit that happens, and like, yeah, like I know the whole like, oh, a skill check, natural 20 on a skill check isn't a critical. Well, I mean I rolled that too, but it doesn't mean that something crazy and cool still can't happen. I mean, yeah, if you say something stupid like, I'm gonna, charm the dragon, or I'm gonna, use a persuasion check to make the dragon fall in love with me, probably won't happen. But something equally as goofy might. And that's the joy of not over planning too much, because if you over plan, you railroad. And it's not to say under plan, but I would say you should at least have a pretty good working knowledge of what's possible. You should, in addition to the rules themselves, you should have established early on in a campaign, especially if you're going to run multiple sessions, what kind of goes and what doesn't. So like my game, for example, because it's on Roll20, if you leave behind somebody or if you don't follow the party, that doesn't mean you're off limits. Like wherever you are on the board is wherever you are. I mean, I make exceptions for like if somebody's computer crashed, like I'm not gonna like kill them while they're away. That's just tacky. But if you were just like, oh, I'm just hanging out in this room while everybody's wandered off, it's like, well, hope nothing attacks you. Last thing you want to hear is Dave saying, roll initiative while you're away from everybody else. Yeah, kind of establish your own ground rules early on in the game so people know what to expect from you more than anything, and what is in the realm of possible and how tough you're going to be on an adventure. Like I play pretty brutal games, but like I don't play just to hurt people. Like I establish the rules like if you do X, then Y might happen. Like if you kick down a door and there's 5 monsters just chilling in there, chances are they're going to jump up and beat your ass. So, but if you're like careful about it and you're like, well, I'm going to search the door or I'm going to listen at the door and then I'm going to probably, as long as you've got a decent enough roll, I'm going to say something like, you hear them talking. And if it's a poor roll, I might say something like, you're having trouble hearing through the door, or like, you know, it's so quiet, your heart's beating too loud that you can't hear through it. Not like oh, there's nothing there, because that's dumb. Like, I want to like let you know that you failed, but you don't like have to act like nobody's going to be. I mean, yeah, people will be meta and cool about it, or not meta and cool about it. But it's so much better if they know like they're kind of like feeling like, man, I can't hear anything, but I think it's just because this door is too thick, or it's because Mikey's shoes are too squeaky, or not because I just roll bad. I think it's pretty effective. I don't know. Half the time, I don't think I know what I'm doing. That's the real secret to D&D. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. I imagine Ed Greenwood and Matt Mercer tell you the same thing. We don't know what we're doing. We just roll some dice and just say, well, if that's what you want to do. What else can I babble about, guys? Let me know in the Facebook comments here. What's been your favorite way for characters to meet at the beginning of the game that instantly connects them as a group? Please not in a tavern, LOL. So that's from Jessica. So what's my favorite way for characters to meet? I'm pretty simple. I'm pretty straightforward and old school. And I also think a lot in the realm of like TV shows. I think it's sometimes cool. Like, while introductions can be cool, like I like to get into the heat of it and go media res. So a lot of times, I think it just makes sense that they might know each other or they were all hired. And it really depends on which game I'm running. So like take my Mad Mage game. The conceit is generally that they're all part of the same guild. So when somebody shows up, they're teleported down to wherever the current characters are, just out of ease. Because if everybody went down the beginning of it and they're like 5 levels down, it's going to be a pain in the ass. So they're teleported in, they meet everybody, they've been hired by the guild by the people who work outside, like their major domos and stuff. And then the characters have to be like, hey, welcome to the guild. By the way, bad news, you're trapped down here. So we're trying to find a way out. And then the relationship evolves from there. So that's how they meet in Mad Mage. With my Saturday group, usually I do a lot of downtime in between sessions because it's very like a one-shot adventure based. A lot of times it's just me testing out like Wizards of the Coast modules. So I ran a lot of Yawning Portal stuff and Saltmarsh stuff with them. And there'll be like 2 weeks of downtime where I use the downtime rolls and then just kind of like 1 or 2 lines on like how they met. Like, oh, you put out a call for some mercenaries and shit up. So I'm not really big. And I know this isn't for everybody. I mean, by all means, people can like meet and do whatever. But I think like with my Mad Mage games, for example, usually the first round or the first game, and there's 23 total players in it, right? With 5 different people every night. And they will go down and they usually meet in their guild house on the forest level of the Mad Mage dungeon. They'll all introduce characters for like, so, because they can't remember who they met or not and like what their abilities are. And if it's like a brand new person, they might have a little bit more backstory. And then typically one of the leaders of the parties, like one of the more experienced players, usually like Jock, who's the ranger, Magnus, who's a monk, or Aaron, who is the wizard, who I would say is probably ultimately like the voice that everybody listens to, because when shit goes bad, Aaron chews everybody out. they'll kind of introduce the stuff. Like at this point, I'm not even doing the adventure hooks anymore. Like I'm just letting them say, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is where we are. That thing over there is this. That thing over there is that." So I don't have to say it. I'm just sitting there listening, and like I'll chime in when necessary. And then like they'll say what we got to do today. So like most of the time, with this ongoing campaign, it's the characters are introducing the adventure hooks. Now with my Saturday Bloody Bunch game, like I just go, go and sorry, I was reading another question real quick, but I'll just like kind of introduce like the Cliff's Notes version of it. And that's a very old school way of doing it. It'd be like a map, an adventure hook, see ya. You know, there was no like you're in a tavern and a man in a cloak meets up and says he needs people and you all combine. Like no, it's just like they knew each other. You're all in a horse cart. It's like Fandelver. Everybody starts on a horse cart. Like they can come up for reasons why they were on the horse cart, but that's not like it's not nearly as important as like what they're doing in the moment, and that's delivering these goods to the town of Fandelver, and then the goblins attack and all that. Because that's more interesting. I think it's more interesting to like put the characters in a situation, and they kind of get to know each other. Like think about the show Lost, right? Like there was no like you didn't have an introduction to these characters when you first met them in Lost. Like it starts off, Jack wakes up in the woods staring up, and there's a wreckage, and there's all these like people. And at the time, you didn't know anything about those characters. They just were all like helping each other on something, and that's a lot more exciting. And then as the show progresses, you start to learn the backstories of these people and like what their little things are. You learn that Saeed was, a member of the Republican Guard, and that you learn that Locke was like in a wheelchair, and like et cetera, like all these, like Kate was a criminal. That in my mind is like the way D&D should run, instead of like this like, hi, I'm Dave, hi, I'm Joe, but it's up to you. Ultimately you can do it any way you want. Daniel's asking me, do I use these huge maps in my real life tabletop games? If so, do you draw them, print them, or use a small map without minis? So that's a pretty good question, Daniel. I find that the way you play on VTT is pretty different than the way you're going to play in person. So I write like some of my adventures are very event based, especially the Hand of the Eight stuff, which is up on my Patreon. But like this obviously is very location based, and like I will do both, and I like location based, but I feel event based and more role playing driven stuff works better at the table because it's easier to like tell the story, and you can see the people in front of you, and you can react and act and stuff. But when it's something visual like this, where it's like very map driven, and like it's like the design of Roll20 itself and its UI is very like you've got this page with this map and this page with this map, like it kind of works better to do it that way. Having said that, when I have played games in person using big chunky maps, what I will do is I will have a combination of like a Chessex, erasable mat. I've also got a bunch of those dungeon tiles that they sell in sets, so I can create like really quick. Like if I have like a simple room, like say like this room here, like I could build this out really quick, just putting together some dungeon tiles and throwing slapping a few doors in there. And then when they're actually doing the point-to-point exploration, what I do is I take my laptop, and this is just the way I do it. I mean, there's a million ways to do this, but I take my laptop and I plug it into a big screen TV, and we all play in an attorney's office, and it's got like a big screen TV and a big like boardroom style table. Yeah, I can get this one to line up. And I project it on the screen, and using Photoshop, I've create a fog of war layer that I can erase as they move along. And that gives kind of the exploration element of it. And it works really good for like hex crawl too. So I'm a big advocate of hex crawl. You got to do it right, and it's tricky because it can be boring. But like if I did a dungeon like this, it would work just the same way as in Roll20. Like I would put like on a top layer like a token that represented the party, and then I would just like erase layers as they moved. Like I would like take the marquee tool, erase stuff, and just delete part of the blacked out layer. That's what's worked for me, and it's kind of fun doing it that way. It takes a little bit of setup to do, no more than VTT, so you have to be kind of ready for that. But yeah, I like that. But I do like event based because it's easier. It's easier when you're playing in person to like have your people move from location to location and just do setup scenes and stuff like that. When you're doing VTT, this is my opinion. Everybody's different. I like the bigger maps because there's a lot of different stuff that they can control and check out. And then, you don't have to move, like with this, you have to move between the different layers and blah, 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 it could be kind of tedious if they're bouncing around a lot. So hope that answers your question. All right. I'm running my mouth and not doing my job. My staff's going to be upset. Sarge's going to yell at me. Better get to work. Get to work, Dave. That's my impression of Sarge. He doesn't really sound like that. But Sarge the NPC. Dave, I need you to make a dungeon. Oh, okay, Sarge. He's going to yell at me now. He's like, I don't sound anything like that. I'm like, I know. That's how I'm role-playing you. You're apparently Bert from Bert and Ernie. Now, Sarge is cool. He's you'll see him in the chat. He's my boss. That's what I call him. He's the one that keeps me on task. That's all. When you're running a business, that's all your staff really is. They're really your bosses. Everything you do is for them. You have to think of yourself like a politician, or like a politician should be. Like we learned in school what a politician should be. You work for them, not the other way around. And I really love all the people who I get to work with because they, if anything, keep me on my toes and make sure that I'm doing all the things that I need to do. Not just to make sure, the bills are paid, but to, grow and have fun and keep the biz fun. So it's having DMDave business has been a lot of fun. I never knew. I mean, everybody who starts a business dreams of I think of it becoming more than what they expected when they started out. But, I never would have guessed that within less than 2 years, I'd be, drawing dynamic lighting in a vampire lair for a living, ranting on about my Dungeons and Dragons. So, I'm glad I've picked the folks that I have to help me get here. They are all amazing. And I hope that we can continue to do it into the new year. So, I'm just going to keep on drawing some of this stuff, and I'll think of other things to babble about. Chances are I'll be like an old guy. I mean, I am an old guy. God, I'm going to be 40 next year. And I will start doubling back on things that I've already talked about. You'll hear the same stories over again. Did I tell you about the time I got started with D&D? This was back in '92. I went to B. Dalton Booksellers, and there they had the black box. I think Sarge is already tired of that story. I don't know. Let me think of what other questions do folks have for me. I'm always interested, in what people want to know about. I sometimes have some ideas. I know, some stuff, I probably can't discuss at the moment, like balancing combat encounters, because that makes more sense, while I'm actually putting down a combat encounter. I did go over a little bit yesterday on how to develop how to start thinking about your encounters in terms of a dungeon and things like that. And there's some math involved with that, and I'll probably cover more of that as I start really feeling this. But what kind of stuff do you guys want to know? And I mean, I'm not the world's best DM, but I have done it for 30 years, so I know a few things. I've made plenty of mistakes. I think you learn more from screwing up than you do from success. Two best way to learn things are through reading other people's mistakes and making mistakes of your own. And I've done plenty of both. Yeah, Ben says he's turned 40 this year. He's just trying now to get into D&D. Well, cool, man. Welcome to the party. It's D&D is a lot of fun, and it's seeing its kind of its golden age. Like really has, it's been around since the early 70s. It probably reached a lot of its popularity back in the 80s. They had like the whole Satanic Panic deal, and if you're new and you're not familiar with that, like people thought legitimately like people who played D&D were like going to go to hell. And this is fringe stuff too. I'm sure not everybody believed this, but it's just like anything you see in the news. Like people are freaking out because their kids are playing games with demons. And I have heard stories from people whose parents legitimately believed that it was satanic and you were going to go to hell. And let's face it, I mean, when you have like Orcus, standing on a cover of a book, or whatever other demons there are, like even today, like Princes of the Apocalypse or Out of the Abyss has Demogorgon on the front of it, who's pretty horrific looking. Or the Player's Handbook, which has what's his name, the fire giant Sturm, or I can't think of his name, guy from Against the Giants. It's probably pretty easy to see that. I mean, granted, we live in a time where, like this, we've had Lord of the Rings franchises, and there's plenty of like, maybe we're desensitized to like imagery of like monsters and things like that. But in the 80s, it was a little bit more, like, what is this? People are pretending to like stuff. But ultimately, anybody who plays D&D knows it's mostly just people standing around and for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to open a door. So, but yeah, like it was pretty popular back in the 80s, and then through the 90s, and then early 90s is when I got into it with the basic black box, and like all the bookstores were carrying, so they were seeing like a big surge. But then the original company that owned it, TSR, almost lost their whole company. They ended up selling the IP to a small company called Wizards of the Coast, who at the time was only really known for a little card game that they had created called Magic the Gathering. But then Wizards got bought by Big Mama Hasbro. So Hasbro, of course, known for like Monopoly and like pretty much any game that you'll find on a shelf at Walmart. Granted, the selection at Walmart's a lot better than it was. It used to be, you could find like Settlers of Catan and stuff like that, because board games too have also seen a major renaissance. But so they made 3rd edition through the 2000s, and it did okay. A lot of people still really love 3rd edition. It was really like I really like 3rd edition, and I had a ton of the books, and I ended up selling them all a few years ago when I first started my my first business, which I kind of regret because some of those books are pretty cool. I would love to like adopt some of that content now. But 3rd edition was very, I would say, player centric. Like, granted, there were lots of books. So like now with 5th edition, Wizards puts out 2-3 books a year with some other assorted merchandise. They make a bunch of money off of like stuff like DM's Guild and other partnerships that they have, so they don't have to do like they did in 3rd edition, where they were cranking out like, it was like 2 or 3 books a month. It was insane. Like I was I was in my 20s, so I wasn't exactly, and I was waiting tables, so I wasn't exactly what one would call a baller. But I still tried to keep up as best I could. I bought a lot of used ones from my local gaming store. This is really before like Amazon became a part of everyone's life, back in the early 2000s. Yeah, Amazon was around, but for the most part, I was still going to FLGS, or favorite local gaming store. In I got out of D&D probably right before 4th edition. So 3.5 had come out, I think, in 3.5 came out pretty quick after 3rd edition. Like they didn't like something about it, or they wanted to kind of do like a soft reboot. So that's where the whole 3.5 came in, which today, as I understand it, is very similar to what Paizo creates with Pathfinder. And I don't remember what it was that I necessarily got into, but I want to say like I really kind of stopped doing D&D. I didn't really have like a normal group. This is probably like around 2008 to 2010. And then I met my wife in 2010. So, there's all that stuff. And then in 2011, it was in 2010. 2011, I sobered up. So also I was going out to bars a lot, so that was another reason I wasn't doing D&D and stuff. Like I was all into like the drinking lifestyle. So I sobered up in 2011, and I've been sober since. And I really got into board games after that, like super duper into board games, like right when like the whole new renaissance was kicking off. So, I had like all the popular ones that you see on BoardGameGeek.com, like all the top 10 lists. I mean, I think I had like 150 at a point. This was kind of like replacing my addiction to alcohol. And that was pretty cool. And then we ended up moving, and I really wanted to start a business, because being sober, like I got out of waiting tables pretty quickly, and then I started taking on sales jobs, and they were just soul sucking, and I didn't want to do them anymore. So I eventually decided to start my own business, because I just got tired of working for like just the worst people. I'd go be my own worst person. And that's, I sold my collection. I started an Amazon business in 2015. And it eventually evolved into what DMDave has become today. Like, very different. Like, I don't really sell a lot of physical products. I have my books, so you can buy the books that I write. And I write a book every month called Broadsword, which is kind of a collection of all the content that I put up on Patreon, but refined, and it's done in the old school style of like Dungeon magazine. So it's intentionally black and white, which ironically is harder to find art for than color. And yeah, it's pretty cool. But other than that, I'm all into digital stuff now, because it's easier to manage. It doesn't require you owning an inventory and doing inventory stuff like I had to do with Amazon. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Patrick says Broadsword is excellent. Yeah, I do enjoy it. It's funny. So Broadsword's my monthly periodical. It's a book, about 150 pages. So easily, we originally were going to call it a magazine, but I didn't think that did it justice. So I call it Broadsword Monthly, because it does come out monthly, but it's pretty thick and it doesn't have ads. Mostly, like I was going to have ads in the beginning, but I decided against it later on. Mostly because I didn't have the time to try to. My wife is watering the window behind me for some reason. I didn't have time to put or time to fish around and make sales for ads. I mean, granted, now I've got a staff, so it's something I could go and do again. But there's other like little reasons too. Like technically, I couldn't send it media mail, so like my cost would have had to have gone up. And like I just decided, like I've got plenty of content. Like I'm capable of writing that much content every month. I mean, so why just use it as space filler? Maybe it's something we'll do again, but we'll see. But yeah, like it's easily 2 to 3 times bigger than what the old Dungeon magazine used to be. Which Dungeon magazine would be about, if you took out all the ads, probably 30. No, not 30. Maybe 40 pages of usable content. and this is the 90s version, like Dungeon. So if you're not familiar with Dungeon, TSR back in the late 80s and 90s had a monthly publication or two monthly publications. One was called Dungeon and one was called Dragon. Dragon was mostly rules supplements and like articles on the game. Meanwhile, Dungeon was strictly adventures. I really liked Dungeon because it had like anybody could like submit an adventure to it, and it like if it was like good enough, it'd get published. And it was kind of cool. Like I remember, and I really liked the early '90s style, which was like all black and white. So if you compare like an early '90s Dungeon magazine to Broadsword now, you'll see they're practically identical. I mean, we have a few changes. You know, it's not to step on IP, but we really wanted to do a throwback to that because, like, yeah, digital content's nice, but I like having something physical, and I really like. I remember I was reading my favorite issue of Dungeon, which is I think number 37 or 39, something like that. And I was like, man, this was so cool. Why did they get rid of these? Like, why don't they make them anymore? Paizo, who made Dungeon and Dragon for third edition, when fourth edition was created, they essentially lost their ability to create content for fifth edition. So for D&D. So fourth edition, they got rid of the open gaming license, which is probably one of the biggest mistakes they ever made because they later figured out like, oh wait, this thing could make us a lot of money. And the Paizo said, all right, well, if we can't make D&D content anymore, we're going to go do our own thing. So not only did they get rid of a source of income for themselves, they also created their single largest competitor in one fell swoop. They created Pathfinder. I mean, Pathfinder, you know, D&D, we're talking tens of millions of players around the world. Pathfinder's probably a tenth of that. But still, I mean, that's market share that could have been D&D's had they had the foresight to see that something like the OGL, the open gaming license, which allows third-party creators like myself to create original 5th edition content, could do a lot for them. These days, they kind of figured it out again. They have the DM's Guild, which I'm not quite sure how it works with the company that owns DM's Guild, but judging by the percentage they take, I'm sure Wizards is getting a big, healthy chunk out of that. And then anything else, like they're making, like they don't have to take on the risks of creating all this content that may or may not sell. So they can do research and development based on how well things on DM's Guild does. So, like, likely this is why that within the last few years, the books that they've been creating have been what they are, because they're seeing what people want on DM's Guild and creating content that is similar to that. And that's pretty smart business. Amazon does kind of the same thing with private label products. If you're an Amazon seller, anybody can sell on Amazon, but what Amazon allows is you can create your own products, which is what I used to do. And not only does Amazon get a cut of that, but they're also learning what works and what doesn't without having to take on any of the risk. So if you create a product on Amazon, like, I don't know, like a garlic press, and it sells really well based on a certain style that you've made it, Amazon's going to go, we should look into making garlic presses. And then they'll make garlic presses. But they, instead of like them testing it randomly and watching something fail on impact, they can just step back and like gather all this data from third-party sellers. And I think a lot of companies are kind of figuring out like, oh, this is a much better way to kind of do things and learn and still make money. So same thing with like WotC. Like, why should we put out 2 books a month when we can put out like 3 books a month based on like a ton of market research, and then get a piece of the pie off of DM's Guild, and also learn from all those writers out there what people want and what they're willing to pay for. So, just a little view into the mind of marketers. Now, I could be totally wrong. I mean, maybe it's just happy luck, but I mean, the internet is built on data, and data is what companies that can use data effectively are the ones that are going to be the most successful. If you don't know how to read data, and if you don't know how to adjust to what data tells you, you're not going to be successful, and you're going to end up making 4th edition, which what they thought people wanted, and then they learned the hard way that it was not what people Now, don't get me wrong, there's still some people who love 4th edition, and I can't say too much about it because I never played one game of 4th edition. I've read the player's handbook, but that was years ago. And from what I understand, there's some cool stuff. And I do like the Dark Sun book that came out for it. I think that's one of the, like, I know this is sacrilegious to say, but I would say it's even better than the original Dark Sun material, of which I own almost all the original books for Dark Sun, all the Troy Baker stuff. But like the 4th edition Dark Sun book is really freaking solid. They ended up cutting out stuff that was kind of dumb from 2nd edition and like tightening it up, and just making a better product all the way around. But anyways, like, yeah, 4th edition, I think the biggest mistake they made, in my opinion, like, and hindsight's 2020, right? Was canning the OGL, because I mean they're still feeling the effects of that today. But now, I mean, 5th edition is having its biggest resurgence ever. There are a couple reasons for that I believe. First, you've got Stranger Things, which Stranger Things is probably one of the most popular TV shows on Netflix, if not the most popular. Maybe Tiger King, I don't know. But seeing the kids play on that, and it's like, oh, what's this? That looks really cool. We should do that. That looks fun. And it's cooler now to do geeky stuff. Geek culture has become chic in the last few years. And with things like Marvel movies coming out and things like that, it's okay to like geeky stuff. Like when I was growing up, like reading comic books and D&D and all that stuff was, you're the weird guy if you do it. Like I remember talking about Infinity War on the bus on the way to school years and years and years and years before even Iron Man came out. So like it's kind of, like nowadays it's like this stuff is so mainstream, it's crazy. Same with Star Wars. Like if you were a huge Star Wars fan, like you were a total nerd. Now it's like everybody loves Star Wars. The other factor that I believe has contributed to the resurgence in D&D popularity, and some of you will probably know, is going to be Matt Mercer and the folks at Critical Role kind of demonstrating what a D&D session can be. Now, having said that, it's what a D&D session can be, but rarely is. Not many of us are professional voice actors with a studio and, lots of cool free stuff and doodads and amazing terrain. Generally, D&D is going to be what you see, what it is, like right here. It's going to be flat black and white maps, headsets, and now because of COVID-19 headsets, or like a Chessex mat with stuff drawn on it. And yeah, like joking around and talking for 15 minutes about how to open a door. That's what D&D really is. And I think some people are afraid of that, what they call the Matt Mercer effect, where They're not going to run their game as effectively as Matt Mercer and the Critical Role folks do. But I think sometimes that fear comes from the GMs themselves. Like they're afraid that if they don't run it as good, it's not going to be as good. And a big skill that I think a lot of GMs don't have that I think could benefit them is knowing how to manage their players effectively. So I'll read a lot on the Facebook groups and on Reddit and stuff about people who have trouble keeping their players engaged. And really the key to keeping players engaged is one, find players who are going to be engaged, which sounds, kind of, like catch-22, but really there are a lot less GMs in the world than there are players. I mean, everybody wants to be a player. Not everybody wants to be a GM. So if you're a GM, you have the ultimate say in saying whether or not people can play in your game. And if you've got people who are combative, argumentative, or don't pay attention, like, they don't have to be in your game. You just got to say, like, hey, man, like, it doesn't look like you're having fun with this certain, this game. Maybe you should consider doing something else and leaving your slot open for them. Unless they're a total jerk, they're going to be like, they're either going to say, yeah, okay, and then you find another player. I mean, God, players are easy to find, especially with Roll20 and stuff. And if you're a GM, it's super easy. Like I've never been hurting for players. Or they'll realize that they're, a problem and can change their ways. I don't like to take away things. Like I'm not a stick person when it comes to management. Like I prefer to give. Like taking away, like creating punishments, just especially for a game, is just silly. So like taking away experience or like booting people out. Like I'd rather it be their decision than the other way around. And then really, like, if you ever have a game that if people aren't paying attention or people don't seem interested, you really gotta like sit there and think, is this the players or is this me? Sometimes, yeah, it's gonna be the players. Like you're just gonna have sucky players. That's what happens. You just get rid of them. Like I've had some toxic players, and I'm like, yeah, dude, you can't come back. You're the worst. Go away. But sometimes, if you've got a group and everybody's yawning or staring at their phones or whatever, just think about, is it them or is it something that you could be doing better? And getting feedback is something I think that's really important in everything you do. Like try to take people's feedback and look at it. Don't get defensive. I mean, first of all, it's a game. Who gives a shit? And then second, like if you're getting defensive, like unless it's like totally absurd, which honestly, if someone tells me something and it's totally absurd, I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like I've had people like on my Patreon, like, Dave, you give too much content. I'm like, well, I'm not going to give less. So like if it's too much, then that's weird. And I'm sorry for giving you too much value. Like that's an absurd one that I'm going to ignore. But if it's something like, you should give more VTT stuff, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, I don't want to give VTT stuff. I'm like, no, this is what people want, so I'm going to do it. So the same thing with like your games and running them. If people don't seem interested, collect that data, see what you can do to make it better. Like watch their expressions when you're running certain parts of the game. See what things kind of get them involved and makes them interested in your session. And once you can do that, then you can start improving your game, and then each time it gets better and better to the point where like they don't, like they're invested in it and they don't want to miss games and things like that. And even me, I mean, I've played, I've got hundreds of hours of DM time logged, but like excuse me, like I'm always trying to be better. Like I always want to make my games better, and I want to try to improve I mean, some things like I know like are just fine the way I do it, and like if people don't like it, it's just a matter of uh, preference. But there are still things that I'm always trying to like. I think like a few nights ago, someone said, "Oh, the like there was a lot of ranged objects, and the monks weren't knowing that they should make calls for their skills." Um, and that was on me. I should have been more clear about, okay, these are ranged attacks. Granted, I mean, some of the monks just forgot that they could catch missiles, but there's like an oddly high number of monks in my Mad Mage game. Like really weird. Like everybody wants to be a monk. Uh, but anyways, like yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, I could improve that. Thank you for letting me know. But if it's like something like I don't know, like how I did a certain rule, like chances are probably I mean, I don't mind hearing your feedback, but just because you're giving me feedback also doesn't mean I'm gonna like change the way I do things. Because like I've done it forever. I like the way that it works. It works for me for this reason. So anyway, that's my soapbox about DMing and pretty much everything in general. Like nobody is born perfect. Nobody dies perfect. But the only thing that you can do to succeed in life and everything else is just think about who you were the day before and try to be a better person than that was the day. Like, I mean, we've got all this crazy stuff going on in the world right now, and like, I'm not afraid to admit, like, I've said the wrong things, I've done stupid things. I mean, like, I mean, shit. I don't want to get too political, but I'm a almost middle-aged white guy. Like, hell yeah, I've made mistakes. I make them on the daily, and rarely are there ever consequences for probably some of the stupid shit that I've said, and I've done stupid shit where I've gotten away with it, and I probably shouldn't have, but nothing crazy. Like I've there's no bodies buried anywhere, or are there? But like it when I was in my 20s, when I was drinking all the time. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. I knew I had a drinking problem and I was trying to get rid of it, but like I always thought I was right and like my point of view is the only one that mattered and like anything that went against that was like, well, it's just stupid. Like you shouldn't think that way. So when I started trying to improve myself some years ago, that's kind of become my whole philosophy of life is who was I yesterday? Is there a way for me to be better today? Like to take a look not just at like my goals, but also like just asking myself, am I any better? Like what could I do better today? Like my health, like oh my gosh, it's so bad. Like I mean, I eat donuts today as my lunch slash meal. I probably slept in too late. I'm pretty crass most of the time, so I mean that's probably something I can improve. And I'm always trying to be a better dude. And I try to look through things through other points of view too, even if it's like something that like I totally don't agree with, like kind of stuff that makes you go like, "Wow, how could you think that?" Like I try to think of it like, all right, so why would they think that? And this helps you better as a storyteller too. If you can think through other people's point of view, you can really improve your writing and your abilities as a storyteller. So, anyways, I am almost middle aged. Damn it. When you have to worry about the salt content of your food, that's your body officially telling you that you're probably getting old. When you have to when like people are like, "Hey, you want to go do this?" and you have to think about whether or not your knees can handle it. That's probably a sign of old age. But again, I could probably stand to improve my health. But yeah, I hope you guys don't mind me waxing poetic about how to be a better person. I've come a long way since I was 30. I started off drinking my face off, gave up drinking, read a lot. God, I read so many books. Pretty much everything I do now, I taught myself how to do through reading books and learning as much as I could about entrepreneurship and marketing. Like I wasn't like I wanted to be a writer all my life, but I didn't really know how to write, and I didn't really start doing it professionally until only like 3 years ago or so. Um, and it turns out I had like an innate talent for it. Like not so much. I don't know if the words that I write are that great. I mean, people. I'm not fishing for compliments, but I don't think there's any. I use a lot of the same words over and over again. But I can do it a lot for long periods of time without um, getting tired or like getting burnt out. And also the way like I organize thoughts in my head for writing, like I can see things as how they're going to end, and I just work my way towards that goal. And it turned out like this was something I could do that not a lot of people could do. So yeah, kind of nice how that worked out. Well, friends, I think other than the doors, I'm done with this mofo. Thank God. I draw one more blue. Oh no, we still have the bottom layer, don't we? That's all it is, man. That's how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So, considering they call sitting the new smoking, yeah, that's that's what someone in the Facebook said. Basically, I've been work from home since 2015 when I quit my day job. I was a car salesman, God help me, which is just the worst. I mean, sorry if anybody listening sells cars, but oh my God, I was so glad to get out of that business. It's so toxic. It's everything that they say it is and worse. And I definitely don't ever want to look back on that section of my life. I mean, I made pretty good money because I think I'm a pretty good salesperson, but at the same time, like, at what cost? The cost of my sanity. So I quit my day job the Wednesday before Thanksgiving in the year 2015, and I did have to go back into the workforce, which I did for 2 years with an online company. But that was fun because like I was writing for a living then. So it was a little bit different, and I learned a lot about tech companies. And actually, it's where like I've gotten a lot of my current staff from. We all came from the same job. This company called Jungle Scout, who I still really appreciate. Like, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that they have a real bad listening problem there. But I think all companies eventually, when you've got too many employees, they're not going to listen. Like everybody's got ideas. And me as someone like I have ideas, but when it got to the point like I didn't feel like I was being listened to anymore, I said, well, I need to go take these ideas and see if they work. And that's what led me to build this company that I have today. Those ideas that I suggested, and I tested them out because I didn't want to make I didn't like I don't like making theories. Like so way back in say 2017, I was writing answers for the website Quora, which Quora is like a question and answer website if you've never been. And I was doing mostly entrepreneurship stuff, which is kind of funny because like I've been an entrepreneur, but I wouldn't say I was like super successful then. But I still wanted to like toot my horn, and I ended up turning it into a marketing funnel, anyways. But a lot of people would ask me the same questions, and usually it was like, how can I start a business for X amount of money? Usually some small amount of money that was like you'd be like, oh my God, nobody can start a business for that. So I had a theory at the time that I could start a business for $0 using, well, let me clarify. Like, I can start a business with no startup capital. I can use just an internet connection and my laptop and go to town. And I used to say this, like it was all like theoretical. Like, okay, if you did this, this, and this, it would probably work. but it would take a lot of hustling, and you'd have to do it through content marketing. So that is what I did. I put my money where my mouth is. Well, my not money, I guess, and I started DMDave.com back in 2000 and the summer of 2018, right after, I think, my wife's, either before or after my wife's birthday. Her birthday is August 19th. And I did it with nothing more than just writing a lot of blog posts, basically a place to keep all my notes for D&D. So at the time I was stocking a Dyson dungeon called his Mega Delve. And you can see some of those old posts. I never got around to finishing it because my players got sick of wandering around the dungeon. And I don't think I was, I think I was still relatively inexperienced back then. And I would post them up, and I would make some monsters, and then I would share it on Instagram on an old account that I had, and then I started building that Instagram account out. So I was writing posts, so that cost me nothing other than my time, and I would do that late at night. This was before I worked at Jungle Scout too, so I was just oh no, I was working at Jungle Scout, yeah. I would do those at night after I got done working for Jungle Scout. And then I would share it, I would write a post, share it on Instagram, and get feedback as quickly as I possibly could. And after doing this for a few months and building up a following, I really just started deciding to expand upon it then, and I started moving into Reddit. And at the time, my job at Jungle Scout was pretty easy because my current boss, they wanted me to write just a couple posts a week. So when you write as fast as I do, writing 500 to 1,000 word posts a week is it's nothing. There wasn't, it was just write them and get them up too. There wasn't a whole system for review and things like that. And unfortunately that changed a year later when I got a brand new boss who used to be a writer. So she knew exactly what a prolific writer is capable of, and pretty much got all the blood from the turnip on that deal. But yeah, I was doing this at night, and I would write easily 2,000 words a night of new 5th edition content. It wasn't always great, so you'll hear me say with folks, if you go back in my old content, some of it's pretty hanky or janky. I was still learning then. But, that's what I was doing. I was writing it, putting it out, seeing what people thought, making adjustments there. And that's what it grew into. But I started that whole thing with $0. Okay, I did buy the WordPress space. But that's just because there were some plugins that I wanted, and I couldn't use the free version to get the plugins. So nowadays, my SaaS bill would probably make most people throw up. God, what I spend in advertising. Huh? It's like a heart attack. Payroll. Well, payroll, I wish I could do more. I love everybody, and I will. I'm going to take good care of my kids. But, yeah, so I had a theory that I could start a business for free, and I did. And here it is today, DMDave.com. It's pretty cool. I love giving away free shit, too. I wish I could give everything for free, but, I'm an American, so gotta pay for shit. But yeah, I used to bartend before I moved to Oklahoma, back when I was drinking, and I found the best relationships that I ever built that led to bigger and better things weren't in the people who would come in and drop $20 bills, I mean, granted, yeah, I mean, I had some, good patrons who could tip good and stuff like that. But I think the best relationships I had were my philosophy was I'm okay with you being I only have, okay, let me get my thoughts straight. It says you can be a weirdo and that's okay. And you can not tip and that's okay. The only thing I couldn't take were people who were like weirdos who couldn't tip. So like if I had to have my ear chatted off by a weirdo who didn't tip, I'd be like, man, just go away. But like when if you were if you were just in a if you just wanted like a beer and just wanted to chat and you were cool, like whatever, I don't care. We could do that. Like we can build a relationship. Like it doesn't matter that much. I mean, it all works out in the end anyway. Um, it's if you take the law, it's the law of averages. Like if this guy doesn't tip me, well, somebody will come in and will tip me, and at the end, that's all that matters. And I built some pretty cool relationships that way. Like, and I ended up building awesome bar nights because those people have friends who do tip, and yeah, I feel like it's the same with patron. And like people will like message me and be like, "Oh, Dave, sorry, I can't be a patron. I really want to be." I'm like, "Don't worry about it, man. Like, take care of yourself, take care of your family. I'm going to try to give away as much free as I possibly can. I mean, I got to take care of my family too, but like, that's why I like to give free stuff. And I think ultimately too, like, if you're going to be into any kind of content, you need to. We live in a world where people want to know what they're getting into before they end up dropping money. And if you can't demonstrate that, and I've had some artists who I've worked with in the past who didn't seem to understand this. Like they wanted, and I don't want to knock artists, and that definitely not all artists are like this. But if you can't demonstrate who you are and what you are capable of, and sometimes you got to do it a lot. Like the ratio is like 4-to-1. Like Gary Vaynerchuk calls it jab, 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 right hook. Basically, you got to throw a bunch of jabs before you can try to go for a sale. You really need to demonstrate and try to show that you have a ton of value. So that's why I love doing free stuff. I would do it all the time. Like I'm like totally the guy who, like, if I was an attorney for years, I would go do pro bono work or something. Right now I'm running a business and I got a payroll and I got to take care of folks. So I hope that some of the lovely people listening who are patrons know that I appreciate them in helping me take care of my beautiful people. Let's see, what do you say? Something relaxing about putting in this dynamic lighting. I think it's like my new favorite. It's probably a waste of time for me, but I get to know my dungeon pretty intimately. Like I'm starting to like get a feel for every nook and cranny of this dungeon. It's like when you clean a house or you buy a house for the first time and you give it like a really good clean. You get to know like every single little piece of that house and what is going on with it. Like when I worked in places before, I remember like really taking ownership with the bars that I would like work hard to scrub because I literally touched every inch of it, which sounds kind of weird, but like it's how I got to know the location. And it's just like this, like by putting all this in, like none of this is like all of this. I mean, I'm not, I don't have an eidetic memory or anything, but I'm gonna at least remember, oh cool, well, here's this set of double doors, it leads outside with a portcullis in front of it. So when I do go back to working on this map and stocking it, like I'll have a good sense of how everything kind of flows together without just like walking in there blindly. So this has been kind of nice. I don't normally make dungeons this way. Normally I would just write it out in a Google Doc, usually pre-GM Binder formatted, so I'll write a lot of the markdown before I even get to it, and I'll show you kind of how to do that. I do have a video that I just put up where I show how to make monsters using GM Binder, which some folks have been like said they're pretty happy with. So GM Binder is pretty cool, but it does take a little bit of like knowledge to kind of really get to know. But and I don't draft dungeons directly into GM Binder either. usually write in a Google Doc first so my editors can mess with that, because it's kind of like you can't use like Grammarly and things like that in the Markdown editor on GM Binder. So I want to make sure there's not a lot of typos. I mean, God knows I'm still going to make typos, but at least I'm going to do what I can to like not. I'm going to have the illusion of it. Um, the so yeah, like really getting to know this dungeon pretty well. It's fun and it's relaxing. I like kind of doing this. It's like meditation, and I'm currently listening. I don't know if it's coming through in my OBS or not, but I've got Michael Gelfi music, atmospheric music playing in the background that's really helping me set the tone. Um, I'm using OBS today because Frosty, who is in charge of editing my videos, told me that my streaming was the worst. On my other videos, like it was really shitty. So hopefully, Frosty, this will be a little bit better. So, what's going on, folks? Anything you're interested in me babbling about? Anything on your mind? Any problems you have? Just want me to shut up and draw lines? Tell me what's going on in your world. I will tell you what's going on in mine. This is looking pretty clean. Love it. I think I'm just about done. I need to put in some dots on this portcullis. So with the portcullises, I really like to, if you did the dots exactly, people will be able to walk through it. So it's better to kind of leave some pinholes like so. It doesn't like look exactly like the portcullis, but it does, it is enough to like block so that when you have a token trying to look through it, they can see beyond, but like they still can't go through it, which is kind of cool. Cool effect. I like the dynamic lighting in games, even if it slows down the slows down the processor like a mofo. It does really add like a real sense of wonder to dungeons. Like it gives like makes them super dark and scary. Alrighty then. Let's take a look at this guy. Look at that. Why is it cut off? Oh, okay. That was just a glitch. Looks good. It looks like we've got everything in there. The next thing I'd want to do, I'm going to add in my dynamic lighting. So we're going to go to tokens and objects. I'll show you how to do this again. It's a cool little trick to get around how to get lighting, especially if you want to create like fake sunlight without leaving tokens all over the place. So what we're going to do is we're going to find our lighting token. Where is my lighting token? Nature circular. There we go. So light source. We're going to plant it like, let's plant it right here. We're going to go to settings, go to emits light. I'm going to do 240 by 120. All players see light. Oh, why didn't it light up? That's odd. It should have lit up like a Christmas tree. Uh-oh. Maybe my light's too much. 160. Interesting. Favorite creatures to run? That's what Sarge wants to know. Man, I don't really have any favorite creatures. I like low CR stuff. It's like high CR stuff's cool, and it's cool to look like a stat block that's got like a bunch of like wild things going on with it. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be more fun to run something low level and to run it right. That's why we were running slow. So I had Advanced Fog of War on. I turned on the dynamic lighting now. And there we go. Yeah, Advanced Fog of War, it's a cool idea, but it doesn't work very well. All right, so we got our token here. This is on our token level now. You're going to want to copy that, go to the dynamic lighting layer, paste it right where that was. Then go back to your object layer, delete it, and you'll see it's still there because it's on the dynamic lighting layer, but it's gone. You can't normally place tokens onto the object and token later, but or excuse me, on the dynamic lighting later. But if you do it on an object and token, cut and paste is kind of like a little hack that lets you get around it. The one thing that I want to make sure of is I want to make sure it looks really cool shining through a door. So I'm going to take this guy here. I'm going to move it out of the way temporarily. So now it looks cool, like shining through there. And let's get our token. So you want to test it out with a token too. So let's get a drow. I like to use the drow tokens. There's Derek the drow. Oops, he's on dynamic lighting layer. That's not where he's supposed to go. You can put a token onto your dynamic lighting layer, but you can't adjust its settings on the dynamic lighting layer. So you have to do it like this. So you can like grab it and get the little setting token and change. We're going to give him just plain dark vision. Make sure he has sight, and then we're going to make sure that we can see what he can see. This is good too when you're testing other dungeons. So look at this cool like effect. And then we'll test this out here too. So that looks really cool, right? So he can see through the portcullises here. That's his line of sight. And then we can test out. Really, like most of the doors, I've drawn pretty good lines, but you always want to like make sure that you're running a token through your dungeon so there's no pinholes that are like not supposed to be working, that are showing off areas that you don't want people to see. And it's really easy to do it, even if it looks like it's like these columns are really blocking space. Kind of don't like that. Skexy. Yeah, I guess there's nothing else in the room, but I really... Okay, well, he can diagonally walk there. Or can he? Let me see. Yeah, that's not fun. I would probably gonna go and adjust that. So this is why you want to test stuff. So like I can't get over to these columns here. It's kind of crappy. So I might adjust that some. Doors look good though. That's really what we want to make sure. A lot of columns in this place, huh? Good to have a fight here. It's always fun to have people hiding around columns. Do we need Derek the Drow? Yes, we always need Derek the Drow. Now, speaking of monsters I like to run, I like Drow, and here's why. In Roll20, a Drow is going to have 120 feet of dark vision. So here's what he can see. Let me find a good example of like how far Homeboy can see. So we could have him here. He can see almost to the end of... Like you can see, he can see all the way over here. Now, if he had somebody who was facing off against him, like this is a player here, and it's a dwarf, you'll see he cannot see Derek, but Derek can see him, which means he can shoot at him. Usually, the drow are armed with light crossbows, which is 30-120 range. So normally at long range, he would get disadvantage on his shot if he tried to shoot this dude here at 105 feet. But because the guy can't see him, he's effectively invisible. Therefore, it ends up canceling each other out. So when people ask me what kind of monsters I like stuff like this because, especially on Roll20, you can really make a very like hectic game with them. And what's cool is they have other features too. Like they can cast Fairy Fire, Darkness. If you ever wonder about monster tactics, definitely check out sometime Keith Amon's amazing website, themonstersknow.com. And he gives you like out of the box tactics for like every monster that pretty much has been made by Wizards in this edition. And I just love his stuff. Like I got a copy of his book. I got 2 copies of it actually, and it's a pretty hot little deal. There's only 6 of you watching right now. I'm gonna go bio real quick, and since I'm streaming, I'm just gonna leave this open. I'll just leave this here so you can stare into the beautiful eyes of Derek the Drow. Derek, you are so lovely. And then Frosty can edit this out after the fact. All right, I return and I brought cookies, but I'm not sharing. Yes, please, Sarge, leave timestamps. Though I'm sure she loves my beautiful voice. All right. So, I have placed my fancy light sources here. I want to check on this one too, make sure it looks cool when the lights are open. Yeah, I think that maybe we can move it a little bit. That way, or give us a second one over here. See, problem is it's going to create that. Bleh. We don't want that to happen. Sorry, 2.5 hours of talking of being DMDave. Could be a lot of fun. Let's see. If you're just tuning in, I am working on dynamic lighting of a 5 level dungeon. You know what I need to do? I need to just make one super light source, I think. So I'm going to pull this guy back here. Actually, we're going to have to bring him back up to the token layer. Okay. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to give this thing like that. Whoops. Yep, that creates all the light we need here. It's going to come in weird here, but I'm not going to stress it. And then when we go through this door here, yeah, that's pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's it. I think we've got the dynamic lighting for this layer done. I kind of want to go back to these columns and redo them a little bit. Maybe instead of X's, just make them lines. That way people can walk, like hide beside them. So while I've got you here, I'll probably go and do that as well. Yeah, if you're just tuning in, I'm doing dynamic lighting on a pretty colossal 5-part dungeon that I licensed from Tim Harton of Paratime Design. That's Paratime CA. He was the official designer for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which I run nightlies for my patrons on my Discord and through Roll20. He is old school, big maps. 37 by 48, I think, are the dimensions, or 39 by 48, something like that. So you're definitely getting your money's worth, and he's a lot of fun. He's a really nice guy. I enjoy chatting with him. He's busy as hell, but he's like me. He's a guy who just does what he loves, and like when you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And that's Tim. Let's see if this. We're gonna test out some. So the problem I'm having is my token here can't seem to get behind these columns, which I kind of don't like. If anybody has a good suggestion, please let me know. Like, I really like it when like you can use columns to hide behind, but they still block line of sight. So you just got to kind of find that like perfect balance. Maybe like that. Let's see if that works. Oop. Gotta make sure it's on his vision. Okay, there we go. Oh, can't go that way though. Only 4 people watching now. I guess it was me eating cookies that scared everyone off. Well, I needed cookies. Let me think of the best way to do this. Maybe make them a bit smaller. Let's try. So what I'm trying to do is make it so my drow token here can fit behind a column. It might just be not possible. The dream denied. You know what? Whatever. But I at least want him to be able to get here. So I'll X off these guys. This is really cool right here. I'm surprised there's not like a secret door. I guess I could put one in there if I wanted, but it feels like that seems like an obvious secret door. Like one statue in between those, but I'm just gonna go with what Tim's original design is, and I trust him. He's the cartographer. I'm just a no good adventure writer. Hey Sarge, if you're listening in, you might share the link to the live stream on Discord or anywhere else you think people would be interested. Yeah, I don't know. Really should start live streaming our Mad Mage games though, huh? I think that would be pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. The Mad Mage games have kind of taken on a... Motherfucker. No, that was unexpected. I can't get there. I want to get there. You know what I should do? Let me see if this works. Mad Mage games really have kind of their own story. It really is like a TV show at this point, where every episode there might be like a different focus on the characters, but like the overarching story is really kind of interesting, and like seeing how they react to. I'm just not gonna be able to do this the way I wanted to. That sucks. Yeah, there's just really fascinating characters and like storylines that have developed just through the players developing it themselves. I'm really proud of those guys and the hard work that they do. Well, I guess the token, someone running the token can pick themselves up and place themselves somewhere. Let's see. Oh yeah, so I can do that. I guess you could do it that way. Kind of sucks I can't use my arrow keys, but I guess it's good enough. Can't be perfect. If anybody has any suggestions, please let me know. But these little alcoves there, those little door jams, those are kind of neat. Kind of fun to hide in. I guess you can't really get through. One thing I want to test real quick is I want to make sure we can get through the doors once they're open. Sometimes when you have doors that are kind of like that, the kind of the fancy style is they won't be able to like walk through them because of the little nubbins that are there. So let's make sure Derek Jr. can get through. Okay, good. So he's not blocked through going to a door. All right. It's not, I mean, worst case scenario, you just pick up their token and move it, or they do it. But, you know, like I like to have anything like that is going to pull people out of the story, and they're going to be thinking more about Dave's crappy dynamic lighting than like the game. And when I'm DMing on Roll20, I like to get involved as little as possible. I like them to like try to figure out what they're doing and where they want to go and stuff. I think it makes it a lot more fun. Yeah, Sarge is talking about our Mad Mage game. He didn't think it was gonna be real D&D. He was probably like, "Oh, Dave's probably a crap DM. Doesn't know what he's doing." He probably still thinks that. Well, he knows it now. I've always warned people, like, "Oh, I'd love for you to DM for me sometime." I'm like, "Are you sure?" Because kind of a hack. That's definitely an area where I need to figure out if someone could fit through. Yeah, where's Derek? Derek is my drow token that I use to explore the dungeon, make sure Dave's dynamic lighting isn't. Yeah, see, that's going to make it a pain to search for secret doors in here. Even that right there. Columns are cool. I don't know if you can hear this. My dogs are freaking out in the backyard. Well, I can get there like that. Well, can he? Let's see. Not really. Still, pick up and move if you had to. This one, though, is a little tricky, but make it work somehow. I think the lighting effect, in my opinion, is a lot cooler than just the making it mobile. And yeah, I mean, if they search there, then whatever, they'll find it. Not a big deal. Let me check a couple more rooms, and then we're going to move on. So, yeah, these columns are cool, but they are really making things kind of a pain. That's a cool room. Shoot. I mentioned this yesterday, but I'm always getting my hotkeys for Roll20 mixed up with my hotkeys for Photoshop. So I just hit Control and the plus sign to zoom. It does not work on Roll20. So, all right. That is that layer there. We've got that all built up. Oh, I need room numbers. So I'm going to copy the room numbers from what Tim Harton has on his. And then we'll be done. So let's see here. I think it's 1 and 2 are going to be the outside layers. So on the map, this region here is accessible on the first map. Like you get in by going along this, and you end up going on the ground level layer. Then the second map gives you access to this balcony here. So this is not I mean, you can jump down from here to here, but this is like a lower level. So we're going to number this 1. And again, I just use the stock text editor from whoops. Make sure you're putting it on the GM layer too. Let's see, other important part of that. I accidentally put this on the token layer, so there we go. Nice big number so you can see when you're way zoomed out. And we'll put it up against the white backdrop so it's a little bit easier to see. Yeah, and this is just pretty simple, just going around. I've mentioned this before, but typically you want to have the most logical entrances, or you want to number your stuff the way that characters are going to interact with it. That way, as you're reading through the book, you're going in the order in which the characters are likely to go. So you don't have to keep jumping around to different sections of the book. I mean, you could number it. Like if you make something like random with Don John, they just throw numbers wherever and it doesn't really make any sense. But Tim's way of doing it, at least the way he explained it to me, was he would start with the primary entrance. So in this case, it's going to be the spiral staircase and go clockwise from there. So in this case, we started with the outside areas because they're really more for viewing, and if people look out those areas, they might be able to see something. Plus, it might be another way to enter this area. You know, if you can climb up to here and then climb up to here, in theory, you could enter the dungeon through there. What I really like about this dungeon too is it has a lot of different ways for people to enter. Some are going to be more obvious than others, and like I want to reward the players for going through the least obvious ways. So if they're clever enough to like climb up onto the balconies, then I'm going to try to reward them for that. So now I'm just going through the way that Tim's got it. I've got the original Photoshop file on a pulled up on my Photoshop, so I'm just copying from that and numbering it the same way that he does. Like I said, he tends to go start, so likely you're going to come in here, so 3A, 3B, 3C, D, then to 4A, take a 4A into 4A. Ha ha ha! It's an English joke. B. One thing Tim does with a lot of his stuff is he takes sections, numbers them, gives them like a broad number. So in this case, like 4A and 4B counts for all this. And then if there's multiple areas in which the characters can interact with the terrain, but it's all still within the same area, which could be like in theory affected. He'll keep it numbered that way. He does this a lot in Dungeons the Mad Mage, where like similar ecologies will all have one number. So like a big goblin layer would all be like number 5, and then it would be split up by like A, B, C, D, etc. In this case, I think, so when he's making these here, I don't know if he had like an idea in mind for what he wanted the stuff to be, but yeah, I'm just gonna keep his numbering convention, and if I have to change it, I'll change it. All right, so 7, 8, 9, 8's up here. So 8, 9. I want to say 10 is going to be, yep, 10. Um, 11. And then 12 is this little guy. I'm going to adjust the size on these just because they aren't lighting up very well, or they're not showing very well in the hall there. So we shrunk that guy down so it's small enough to read. We'll do the same with this. What did I put it at? 40? I think so. Maybe even smaller than that. What did I put that in? Yeah, 56 looks like it. So we're going to shrink these down to 56. That way they're a little bit more large, or they're not sticking out in the middle of the hall like that. So, 13, 14, 15, 16. Oops. Don't know if you guys can hear the music or not, because I got OBS running, but I've got Michael Gelfie music playing, which is pretty cool. He does atmospheric stuff, and we've been chatting about collaborating for a while now. Maybe Sarge can tell me in the chat whether or not he can hear the music. If not, I'll have to toy with it again tomorrow. Since these are different, I'm going to make... Whoops, 19 goes there. 18 goes here. I think a good dungeon map has about 30 areas to it. You can get a nice combination of like stuff with 30 areas. I mean, granted, it really depends on what you want for the dungeon. If you want full-on exploration, and 30 is a good number. If you're looking more for like a fetch quest that's part of a broader story, than maybe a smaller 6-room dungeon or something. Also, think about the level too. Like a first level party shouldn't be going through a 30-room dungeon. A first level party is going to gain a level after, and they're going to burn through all their resources like after like 4 to 6 combats. Which is why if you've ever run Fandelver, that's why the Hobgoblin Hideout or the Goblin Hideout is relatively small compared to the rest of the maps in the game, especially like the Lost Mines. But by the time you get to the Lost Mines is like itself has like 25 27 rooms or so. Nice little Mike Schley map. Everything leading up to that's smaller though, just because it's different levels, and you have to think about how much time you want them to spend in there, and that's going to come a lot with the math, which isn't the like for some might be like, oh no, the math, I don't want the math, Dave. Well, it's not that bad. You just have to have an understanding of it and how it works, and like how it affects the game. And how it can help you balance adventures when you want to do them right, and you don't want to like make them too tough or too strong. Typically, your adventures should, well, sorry, I'm just kind of half thinking at the moment, but like, let's say if you wanted to do a one shot and you didn't want any rest in between, you have to be cognizant of the amount of adventuring day experience that the party can handle before they need to take a rest. And this information can be found on page, I think it's 82 of the DMG. And I'll tell you the amount of adventure day XP. That is the most amount of experience that the party can reasonably handle, and that's encounter experience, not given experience, which are two very different things. What's the most experience that they can handle before they need a rest and their resources are depleted? And resources in this situation mean hit points, spells, anything, special features, anything that they can use that they regain once they take a long rest. Basically, go into save mode, which is what a long rest has become. Music cut out. Ooh, more spooky music. So if I were to build this place where a party could get through it in one day, which is crazy, it wouldn't really be a good design. And this was a 5th level adventure, which is what I'm building it for, making it 5th level. Then I would have to make the sum of all encounters needs to come up to 350 adjusted XP per day per character in this entire dungeon. All 150 some rooms that I'm planning out with this bad boy. What that would end up doing would make probably a lot of like really easy encounters. So they'd have to go through like a ton of fights just to add up to like a normal thing. But realistically, this is like a multi-day dungeon, so we have to be kind of cognizant of that. Like, this isn't something you just do. It's like Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's not just something you do every day. You need to have like in theory, you're supposed to go back and forth, and that's why I think the gates and stuff like exist in the design, because they're meant to like get characters down levels faster, so that they go back. I'm using them kind of like differently. It's just kind of points of interest, but that's how. Really, if you're like in the yawning portal, you're like yawning portal to here, like, it's like Super Mario and like using the flutes to get to level 8 and faster. The difference is this is a role-playing game, so if you're not the appropriate experience to fight Bowser, Bowser's going to maul you and wear your face as a hat. The Bowser of this, which is Hallister. That's in my Dungeon of the Mad Mage game. Phooey. It's supposed to be 25. But yeah, like I would probably, it depends on how I want to do this. Like if I want to make each level its own dungeon. So like if you look at Quabus, that's kind of like what I did there. But I see this as being like a remote location, one in which the characters, once they arrive there, they kind of have to set up camp outside maybe so they can repeatedly go into it, and I think it would be kind of cool and spooky. Then maybe even have like nearby place where they can restock if they need, kind of like the old Diablo game where you had this like place that people could go and get stocked up and go back into the dungeon and go down the levels. That's all D&D really is, or not always, but sorry. I think I'm just like running out of steam here. I've been talking for 3 hours. You're probably tired of listening to me too, so it's fine. These are probably a little big. But basically what I'm going to do with this is, yes, he's going clockwise, doesn't he? Kind of clockwise. Okay. What I'll probably do with this is make it so like the adventurers, once they're in there, they might have trouble leaving. I don't know. I'll have to decide. And that dynamic is going to be based like a lot on how I want it to run. Like I can't imagine like a vampire being like, oh man, some people broke into my house today, and then they did it again the day after that. We really got to do something about these guys, these same group of guys breaking into my house every day. Like that doesn't make sense, right? So we need something to account for that. Whether it's the vampire, like we have rules for how the vampire changes the setup, or maybe the vampire is away. Like that's something cool I've seen in some of the Mad Mage layers, is that like the main bad guy's like not there, or they're like doing something else, and the that way the good guys can keep coming back and forth. So we might do something similar with that. Like they're searching this place. I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go. But here it is. This is the uppermost level of the dungeon. This nameless vampire dungeon built out of an old monk stronghold that we are working on today. I'm probably going to pop off here because my ears are about to fall off. But yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys again later. I'm probably going to go finish up the last sub-level with its dynamic lighting soon, probably later tonight. That way tomorrow we can start getting into encounters and wrapping up this dungeon. Once I have an idea of the encounters and stuff, I'll start writing it out in draft, and then finally I'll put it in a GM binder and release it, so you'll get to see kind of all this. Likely I'll do it one level at a time. So if you're a patron, first level will probably be free, and then I'll probably lock the rest to like I'll probably put the top layers on one tier, and then like the two subterranean layers on another. So anyways, for those of you who listen all the way through, thank you for joining me. I hope you learned some things. I really love your questions, and yeah, we'll see you again soon. Peace.